I'm Jenna.
And I'm Ryan.
We've been married for like 5 years. We have been married for 5 years, and we have 3 kids. Our oldest is Vin. He just turned 3, and Riley is 4 months younger than him. So he's 2.5, and then our youngest is 6 months, Isley. And Vin is adopted, and he has Down syndrome. So we brought him home when he was 13 days old, straight from the NICU. We got a call that there was a 10-day-old baby boy with Down syndrome. We had been foster certified for about 5 months at that point. We didn't have anything. We got the call and they said, you can pick him up tomorrow. And I was 4 months pregnant with our daughter Riley, and we had just moved into this house, and we were both in grad school I was finishing my thesis. I was working full-time. He was working and in grad school. So we basically had every reason to say no, to say not right now. But God just did this incredible thing and gave us some peace that really only came from Him, because there was no way we probably would have said yes without having that insane amount of peace as soon as we hung up the phone. We talked on the phone as he was driving out of town, and I just said, I feel like we need to say yes. And we said yes, and we picked him up 3 days later, straight from the NICU, 7-pound little guy, and we were his foster parents for 620 days. Not that we were counting or anything. And we finally were able to adopt him about almost a little before his 2nd birthday. And that year and a half or so of fostering him was the hardest thing we've ever done. Not because of him, not because of any difficulties that came with him having Down syndrome. It was just the nature of the situation of foster care and what that entails. And it was one of the darkest times, because you're truly exposed to some of the hardest things in our society, and you're exposed to it firsthand, and the people who are getting the brunt of that the most are children. And so that was really hard to see firsthand and be a part of. But and we didn't know, every day we didn't know if we were going to be able to have him in our home the next day, but we chose to love him as our own regardless of that. And that was hard, but he's incredibly worth it, and he's the best thing and the best son, and we've always treated him as ours. From the day we walked into the NICU and saw his little eyes looking up at us with all the tubes in him, and we just knew there was no way we could hold back not loving him fully. So yeah.
We were just out of control. We had no control over the situation. Only thing we could control was loving him and providing for him, and just hoping and praying that we'd be able to keep him. He's always just felt like a part of our family and done so well in our family that yeah, we were ready to do whatever it was going to take for him to stay with us.
We had no idea what we were signing up for, and we always knew we wanted to adopt. We didn't quite know what that would look like, but some really good friends of ours did foster to adopt, and they adopted a little girl with Down syndrome, and that really happened while we were praying through if we should or shouldn't. And God just kept opening these doors and giving us glimpses of how He is in control when we're not. And so that really helped us solidify saying yes and moving forward. And why can't we have a child with Down syndrome and have that opportunity to share their worth in a really specific way, by having them in our family, by showing our family, our extended family, there is so much worth for every child. Why not use our home and our ability to love a child to just show that worth specifically for Down syndrome? And so when I mentioned that to him, he wasn't against it at all. He just was like, I've never had an experience with anyone with Down syndrome. So we had a lot of open conversation for probably like a good year, and then that's when our friends adopted a little girl with Down syndrome, and that just really, I think, sealed the deal for us in giving us a really firsthand experience on what that can look like, and really just a lot of unknowns are based off of fears because we haven't had those experiences. And so being able to bring in that into our family really just changed our entire extended family, and I think friends can say that as well.
Yeah, for me, I didn't really have experience or any background with people who had Down syndrome, and so it started with her desire for adopting someone with Down syndrome, whereas my desire was more just adoption in general. And the more that we talked about it, the more that I really saw an opportunity to provide for someone who would need our help and also be a great part of our family. And we started to meet people with Down syndrome through church and other places, and that gave me the exposure that I didn't have, and really helped me enjoy being around people with Down syndrome. I think the best thing from our experience has been being able to have someone in your family who has a different background and a different experience, but is completely a part of your family, and you can love and embrace. And we've learned at least as much from him as he has or will ever learn from us, just through that experience. So I think the best part is just the beauty of bringing someone into your family in a way that's not the typical way that people come into a family. I would say for anyone considering adoption, there is a real need out there for a lot of kids who need a home and need a family to love them. And so one thing that we have said to people who brought it up to us is if you've even thought maybe that is something that you would find interesting, at least pursue some level of it. And it may not end up being something you can do, but you might be able to support a family who does.
Really, the best part about adoption is being able to say yes in some really hard circumstances. And I think that goes hand in hand with the hardest part of adoption, because in our experience, adoption couldn't have happened without there being some kind of loss, without there being some kind of trauma. And that's a hard part of adoption, but I think that's the beautiful, it goes hand in hand with the beautiful side of seeing the redemptiveness of what that can mean, and not letting that be the end of his story. That his story ended up being a family, and a family who's going to love him all his days and love him with his extra chromosomes, and he's just like our other kiddos. And so those are the best parts and the hardest part of adoption, but we wouldn't change it, and that's part of our story and his story and our family's story. So